Hello students, myself Rajkumar Meena, Assistant Professor in English, posted at Government's Art College, Alwar. Today we are going to make a critical appreciation of John Donne's poetry. Before it, we have just a prior introduction to the Donne. As we know, John Donne belongs to metaphysical school of poetry, and he was born in 1572. His name was pronounced as it's spelled D-U-N-N, Donne. His father was an ironmonger. His mother was a daughter of John Haywood, one of the celebrated Elizabethan dramatists, and sister of Jasper Haywood, one of the celebrated Jesuit missionary priest of his time. As we seen that he had inherited his early attachment from his father and literary talents. Religious perspectives he gained from his mother. Not too much is known yet about the poet's childhood. Regarding his education, he receives early education at home, but there are two known things which may have been of some consequences. They are the early death of his father and his bringing up under a strict disciplined Catholic mother who employed Catholic teachers to coach the poet and his brother privately. Donne's father had died when he was hardly 5 years old. Donne was also as a rebellious temperament from the very beginning of his life. Thereafter, he went for Cambridge. Again, after 3 years, he went to London. In year 1592, he entered Lincoln's Inn to study law. As we earlier suggested you that he belongs to school of metaphysical poetry. As we think the poets deal with the subjects of humanities, here Donne got his early education in law also. This too he left in 1593. In the same year, he openly rejected Catholicism and accepted Jacobean Anglicanism. He started writing poetry in 1593. His first creation were satires group of poems were published in it. In those satires, he ridicules everything, such as conventional and serious matters which were going pursuing on that period. In 1600, he became private secretary to Thomson Gritton. He took his residence with his master's family and remained there for 4 years. Here he fell in love with Anne More, his master's niece. He married her secretly in year 1601. The fact of the secret marriage became known after 1 year. Mr. Egerton dismissed Dunn from his services as a private secretary at once. Hereafter, Dunn faced a great financial difficulties. He took up odd jobs to maintain himself and his growing family. In year 1608, his father-in-law was reconciled to him. He made him a generous allowance which dismissed his acute financial worries. In the year 1608 to 1615 were the still year of great mental conflicts and financial difficulties period in John Donne's life. In the year 1617, one of the changing thing happened in his life was his wife died and leaving behind 7 young children under his charge. Thereafter, few years, in year 1630, Donne's life was also ended. Here we can say Donne's life was one of the most tormented and tortured lives of his time. By the birth of an inquesting and inquiring temperament, Donne himself pursued the satisfaction of natural urges and worldly desires. On the other hand, he was naturally inclined to try to understand his own self in the light of study of philosophy and religion. Even in the stormy days of his youth, he would leave his bed at 4 a.m. and normally studied till 10 a.m. A good time was given to his studies. He was too conscious towards his studies also while facing the financial difficulties. His mind remained vigorously active throughout his life. Donne excelled within the compass of short lyrical poems. His inspiration was a brief duration. His poems were meant primarily for private reading and private circulation. The first volume of his selected poem, Songs and Sonnet, came out of 2 years after his death in year 1633. Here is a short introduction to John Donne's early life and how it began to write poetry, write observing things in the world. Today, we are going to take a brief glimpses of John Donne's poetry, especially the poem Go and Catch a Falling Star. As we suggest you that first, before going to read a poem, we have to a brief introduction to poem's poet, who had written it, in which circumstances he had written it, what was his mental condition while the poem was written. These are some questions which arises in our mind and helps also to get clear meaning of the poem. So we started with poet's introduction, his life introduction, and how the things happens in his life and how he changed a normal man to a poet. Now onwards, we are going to have a brief introduction to John Donne's poetry, Go and Catch a Falling Star. As we know, in 17th century, he belongs to metaphysical school of poetry because he was noted for his extravagant image and subtle wit. In this light, playful, almost mischievous utterance, he expresses his great distrust of womankind through a serious and exaggeration. He suggested that it is no more possible to find a faithful woman than it is to catch a falling star or to perform a greatest of known impossibilities. This song was posthumously published in 1633 in the volume entitled Songs and Sonnet. This poem was written by Donne in his early youth when he was living in London. The subject of the poem is near and about women's inconsistencies. Mm, In other words, we can say the subject of women inconsistency was an stock subject by Dunn and lived it with personal experiences. His gay life in London and his association with different women in London only confirmed his view about woman's faithlessness. Here in this poem, the poet, through a series images of impossibilities of discovering a true and faithful woman, while the poet, following the patriarchal tradition, made a woman a heroine and a goddess worthy of love, admirations, and worships. In the different contexts, or we can say that in the same context, metaphysical laughs at the patriarchal trend of thoughts about the heroine or woman presented in their poems. Donne remarked weaknesses and supposed faithlessness in the nature of women. Shakespeare maximum remarks that frailty the name is the woman was a quite popular in the age of Donne. The cynical attitude to the fair sex is found mostly in the early of the poem. In the later poems of Donne, we find a rational attitude to love and sex. As we are today talking about briefly about the poem The Go and Catch a Falling Star deals with women inconsistencies. The theme of the poem is women inconsistencies. Poet says that to come across a constant woman is more impossible than the greatness of a known impossibilities. Even if one could catch a falling star, baguette, a child on a frog-rooted plant called mandrake, recall the passes, find out who clapped the feet of Saturn, teach the mermaids to sing, change human nature, so that envy does not prick him. Find out the reason which make a man honest, and even if one of writes 10,000 days and night to see these and still strange sight, one will not find a woman true and fair. Here, Johnson, in his poem, raises a great kind of question that it is not easy to find a woman who is true and fair both. In the last stanza, the conceit reaches an unexpected clause. If thou findest one, let me know. Such a pilgrimage was sweet, yet do not, I would not go. Thought at the next door might meet. Thought she were true when you meet her, and last till you write your letter, yet she will be false ere I came to the two or three. As in this stanza, the idea of done to as in a concluding stanza is that even in perchance one came across a woman true and fair before one would write the second or third letter to her, she is bound to be false and faithlessness. To see a true woman would be wonderful, and one would undertake a pilgrimage for that. But it would be useless since by the time the pilgrims reaches the destination, the virtues of woman would have turned flawless. Here, in this last stanza, Donne once again emphasizes to his thought that it is too difficult to find a woman who holds the two qualities, true and fair, as similar it is difficult to find who had clapped the Satan's feet, who had teached mermaid to sing, as similar these things. John Donne, with the help of these conceits, try to make a comparison between things which are possible and things which are not possible. Some things are easy to find and some things are not too easy to find. As similar, Donne in his poetry suggests that it is ever and ever too difficult to find a woman with a fair mind, and true nature and faithful or loyal towards his or her friends. Done poetry is also a poetry of metaphysical school. In the metaphysical school of poetry, we found poets try to find or try to describe his own poetry while using the new standards or new comparison or new conceits or new style or thoughts to set his poetry, or we can say metaphysical poetry is a school of the poetry in which poets presents their thought while describing with the help of science or beyond the physical things. They hold some qualities that they are setting a landmark to a new form of traditional poetry which were earlier presented in that era. There, the metaphysical school of poetry was little bit inclined towards scientific approaches also. One, we can say that dramatic element is also present in metaphysical school of poetry. In his poem, Donne geniusly presented the dramatical theme in this poem, Go and Catch a Falling Star. With the help of example, I am going to elaborate my words. As we say that in this poem, Go and Catch a Falling Star, Donne geniusly was Donne's genius was essentially dramatic. Donne uses dramatic elements like sudden beginnings, dramatic speeches, colloquial words, and rhetorical devices so as to arouse the interest of reader. Almost each of his poems in is a speech made by one character to other who is either presented or imagined. The poem Go and Catch a Falling Star is addressed to a reader challenging him, who Dunn is challenging him to find out a honest woman. In the early, or we can say in the concluding para, go and catch a falling star. Get with the child, a magic root. Tell me where all the past years are, or who left the devil's food. Teach me to hear the mermaid sings, or to keep off envy and stinging, and find what wind serves to advance an honest mind. In these opening lines, he, from the beginning of the poem, suddenly started with a question to whom? To reader. And after it, a brainstorming start in the reader's mind. It is the quality element of John Donne's poetry. The opening line, quoted above, immediately arrests the attention of the reader and apprise him of the situation or the problem. With these sudden or immediate arrest of attention of reader mood, he set some parameters in reader's mind and start arousing some questions to get some kind of a conclusion. They reveal the mood and set the love of diction and rhyme. Moreover, there is hardly any sameness and monotony of mood or situation. Another point in this poem we are going to discuss is the poetic beauty that represented in Dunn's song Go and Catch the Falling Star. As we are talking about the poetic beauty, the moment of the poem on the both the planes of drama and meaning is completely fused. Each line contains an active and dynamic images issuing from common words as go and catch, get with, child, tell me, who teaches dash dash dash. But the pivot of the moment is to chop the lines, each of them monosyllabic words with a long, heavily stressed vowel sound, climaxing the drama and clinching the meaning. Such sudden shifts from the created rhyme are the central to the Dunn's poetic mood. While we're talking about the style of Dunn's poetry, we can easily conclude that the colloquial form of poem or the speaking voice in the real situation deserves attention The rhythm is similar to that of speech of rhythm, which changes according to the need of argument. The breaking of the terameters from in the line 7 and 8 is a dramatic device that projects tension rather than irregularity and indicate the stress that one would use in dramatic reading. The uses of hyperbole is refreshing and understandable. As a simple example, I would like to quote the line, "Then the 10,000 days and nights till ages snow white hair on thee." The witty, ironical reversal in the last stanza is a device commonly used by Donne. All his journey and trouble in the finding it true and fair would result in the love labor lost, because thou she were true when you meet her, and last till you write your letter, yet she will be false ere I came two or three. The poet in these last concluding line draw the image from the vivid field of knowledge, such as mythologically, Christianity, and legendary love, and he proves his thesis with a masculine gusto and youthful vivacity. Here we can conclude it that the Dunn's poem entitled "Go and Catch a Falling Star" is a song. Dunn invested his song with the same intellectual vigor which characterized his poetry in general. The poem "Go and Catch a Falling Star" is indeed bursting with youthful vivacity and sheer playful fun with imaginary. The theme of the poem is woman in constancy, which has provoked a series of fantastic, extremely far-fetched images which harmor in the point that to came across a beautiful, constant woman is more impossible than the greatest of known impossibilities. The final conceit beats all the previous one. The idea is that even if perchance one came across a woman true and fair, she is bounded to be false and faithlessness very soon, as he represented in the last concluding stanza of his poem. Thank you. Stay at home and be safe.